The Kinetic Rock and Roll Direct Drive Smart Trainer, the only direct drive smart trainer at the moment that rocks and rolls. This trainer has been on the verge of release for around 12 months now. With a few false starts, it's now on the shelves in stores. Kinetic have been in the indoor training game for a very long time, but it hasn't been smooth sailing as they move towards the smart trainer side of things. It's a very different game with all the new electronics involved. Hopefully they've got all the boxes ticked with the R1, so let's have a look. Speaking of tick boxes, the product description list. So over to the unit specifications, direct drive interactive smart trainer. It's a rear wheel off trainer, bike compatibility 130, 135 quick release and a native Thru-Axle. You use the Thru-Axle that comes with your bike, no extra adapters or things needed. Once it's set up, it's good to go. Freehub, Shimano, SRAM, compatibility, no cassette is included with this. The wireless protocols supported are what we expect in 2019, so ANT Plus FEC, as well as ANT Plus Legacy, and Bluetooth Smart FTMS. The R1 also has a USB port for wired connectivity, however there's no USB cable in the box, and compatibility is unknown at this point in time. A future option, I guess. The data transmitted, power, speed, not cadence at this point in time. It was initially there in firmware, has been taken out. They are now including a cadence sensor in the box, but stay tuned, I guess, for cadence. Power accuracy claims plus or minus 3% with a spin down calibration required. Max grade simulation 20%, max wattage 2000 watts. Flywheel size and weight is unlisted, but the unit is very heavy, so I expect the ride feel to be pretty good on this. Noise level, yes, it's not quiet, it has noise. More on that soon. Source of power is mains power, but the resistance can also be set manually before you pull the power. So you can set between 1 and 100% resistance and pull the power and take that out to a race or as a warm-up or something like that. But do note, it is a very heavy unit. The firmware is upgradable via the mobile app. It has adjustable feet, very adjustable feet with 4 points of adjustability. And yes, it rocks and rolls. Looping back to that USB port, as I mentioned, there's no cables supplied with that, and it's not supported by anything that I know of at this point. And I don't expect anything to be able to plug into an iDevice like this anytime soon. Wires into these kind of Apple devices is from times gone by. It's not going to happen anymore. So I think that'll be limited to PC and Mac only as a guess. So that's it on paper. Let's get over to the Llama Lab and unbox this thing. Okay, definitely one of the heaviest and largest boxes that I've received here in the Llama Lab. And one of the best packaged trainers. It is absolutely stocked with soundproofing cardboard. Here we are, pretty much all built. There's not a lot of construction required. Okay, with the unit out of the box, let's set everything up here for a kit grid shot with everything that is included. It does come with a quick release setup, which we will convert over the Thru-Axle for my bike. Simply pull the legs out and screw those rear tabs in and you're done. There's no build required. In the box, we have the power supplies, Thru-Axle adapter kit, quick release, few token subscriptions for a few things, and the manual. The manual's pretty good. Now, I didn't read the whole thing back to front, but it has some great glossy details in there. Okay, straight into it. Thru-Axle conversion here, taking out the little plugs, putting the Thru-Axle ones in. Next up, getting the cassette loaded with the bracket tool. Makes life so much easier having one of those. Cassette's on, making sure we don't cross-thread that. Okay, good to go. Power in. Next thing is to check for the firmware updates. It even says this on the unit. So we need the Kinetic app. We then connect over Bluetooth. It takes a few tries to get the status of the unit, but it will tell you if there is a firmware update available. There was firmware version 2.0 at this point in time to upgrade to. So we got that done, and that gets us onto the latest production firmware. Okay, finally installing the bike. Native Thru-Axle, so we use the Thru-Axle that comes with the bike. No adapters or anything required. Goes on pretty easily. And the first noise test. This isn't the shotgun mic, so do be aware of that. But there is a bit of a whir to it. From the back here, you can see the rear legs lift up and down. They're all fully adjustable on all 4 points. It's the level of play you've got side to side. Now the rock and roll feature of the trainer can be adjusted. You can see the two little grommets down here, little rubber spacers, and underneath the unit you can tighten or loosen those. I guess it depends on rider weight and preference, but they are adjustable. I left mine stock standard for now. Okay, next up over to Zwift. It's time to get this show on the road. We hit search, controllable trainer for Ant Plus. That is the R1 power source. We select the trainer version of the power source as well. So 40411, and we are done. Over to Cadence. It is listed as Cadence, but it's 0 for now. So we can't use the R1 as a Cadence source direct. And finally, over to the Llama lab test to get the show on the road. So this is Llama lab test number 2 happening right here. And away we go. Okay, just off the bike there from the second Llama lab test, and this is my favorite part of the reviews, where I discuss the actual ride feel, the user experience. What is it like to ride? Is it like riding a bike or like riding in sand? Well, first of all, the R1 has a really nice road feel to it. That heavy flywheel of unknown weight, except we do know it's heavy, is really good. Once you're spinning up and you're on top of the gear, it really feels like you're riding along with momentum outside. So that is a tick box for there. The resistance unit though is a stepper motor design. So where it'll move magnets closer to the resistance unit and further away. If it wants more resistance, it goes in, less resistance, it goes out. And that stepper motor has a few catches with it that you need to know about. First of all, it's mechanical, so it can be slow to respond. Where this is noticeable is in erg mode. So if the resistance change in erg mode is from 100 watts to say 500 watts, it will take a few seconds to get there. It's not instant. So do be aware of that. In sim mode, the gradient changes. If you're rolling in from 0% up to a 4% gradient, it might take a few seconds to actually feel that gradient change as the stepper motor changes the resistance physically on the trainer. This isn't a bad thing in sim mode because outdoors, if you've got momentum rolling into a climb, you won't hit the hill and slow down straight away. It takes a few seconds, so it's not quite a bad thing. Something to be aware of though. And in sprints, if you do jump out of the saddle from say 100 watts up to a 1300 watt sprint, by the time the magnets will move in, you'll be on top of the gear and spinning out. So sprinting on this unit, you need to get your head around the timing and maybe ramp up a little easier, if that makes sense, into sprints rather than going from 100 watts to 1000 plus in one pedal stroke. So just do be aware of that. It's a stepper motor design. It's not too different to other stepper motor designs out there on other trainers. You just need to learn how to ride the trainer and how the trainer responds to your style of riding. Onto the noise of the Kinetic R1, and I can report it is not quiet. It has a bit of a hum to it. It's due to that horizontally grooved belt, which most companies have done away with now. Kinetic have still stuck with that design, and as such, the unit is not silent in its operation. There's also noise gremlins. That's the best I can describe them. As I'm riding along, it'll change tone or pitch of the flywheel. There's no vibrations coming through, but it just changes noise for unexplained reasons. It's not a stepper motor changing resistance. It just happens to make different noises, whether it's temperature related and the fan's kicking in or something like that. I'm not sure what's going on. It's not obnoxious, but by today's standards, it is quite noisy. The best way for me to show these sound gremlins is to jump here to Final Cut Pro, my video editing software that I use for these videos. And if we have a look at the timeline from here to here, this is 200 watts erg, and from here to here is my 250 watts erg. These are all at same resistance here, same resistance through here. So there shouldn't be any change, maybe slight changes to cadence, 1 or 2 RPM, maybe 3 or 4. Resistance changes should be very, very minimal. But you can see the sound bar there. This is what I'm looking at through here. Something changes there, 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 and there. So these are actual sound changes occurring for no apparent reason. Now I'm going to be playing this one here. So 31, 26, 27, I hit go. And for no reason whatsoever, same power, same resistance, the noise changes. so it's inconsistent noise coming from the R1. Here it's not too bad, but then when you jump up to here, that noise is back. So, sound gremlins. Speaking of noise from the unit, the fan continues to spin for about half an hour. So long after the show is over, the party still continues from the Kinetic R1. That was with version 2.0 and 2.4 of the firmware. Probably a good thing that it's not overheating and warping the plastic, because things get really, really hot. But after I stepped off the trainer, I'd expect that to spin for probably 60 seconds max. Half an hour is probably a little bit too long. Okay, 5 minutes after stepping off, and still going, and still going, and after over half an hour, the fan finally stopped. And finally, not to forget the rock and roll part of the trainer, the magic that makes this one really stand out in the marketplace. Is it any good? What was that ride like? Well, I've covered smart trainers on rocker plates quite a bit, well, extensively, with 2 in-depth dive videos on those, and it's complex. Let me discuss that just quickly here. On a bike, static movement from side to side isn't how a bike operates outdoors, unless you're in a crosswind, of course, where your bike just goes sideways with a straight wheel. Outdoors, a bike will snake and steer side to side, very much like surfing on a wave, going straight down the wave, or if you're on a skateboard, riding down the road. It's a very different experience than just static flopping side to side. And as such, with the static front wheel block, it's a bit meh, so to speak. So what I've done is I've created the homemade steering block and angled it up a little bit to be in line with the rake of the bike, so I can turn the bars, and the bike steers and rocks a lot more naturally here in the Lama Lab, and that changed the experience for the better, definitely. Pedaling a bike outdoors where the bike is free to flop side to side, you kind of counteract the bike by pulling up on the side that you're pushing down on to get maximum leverage. Indoors, when the bike is static and not snaking along, the bike will want to flop to the side that you're pressing down on. Now that's sort of opposite to what you need to do to ride a bike. And if you develop those skills indoors where you're flopping to the side you're pushing down on, and you ride outside like that, you look like a wet piece of spaghetti sort of dribbling down the road. That's not how it is. You'll develop bad habits. So you need to know how to properly ride a bike on one of these rocker plates or a free moving base to get the most out of it. Sprinting, it's not for sprinting. It really isn't. The bike sort of, what would you call it? It sort of counteracts. There's elasticity in the swaying motion, which means sprinting is interesting, but it definitely doesn't replicate sprinting outdoors. I think the rock and roll side-to-side motion is handy for a little bit of relief on the saddle for long steady state efforts, but again, you need to make sure you're not just slopping side to side, which is the motion it wants to make you do. So you need to learn how to ride these and replicate the outdoor motion to get the most out of that rocking side by side. Is it a killer feature that I do love and would put above all other features or downsides of this trainer? Absolutely not. I do like a little bit of flex, but it's not really for me. So there's my on-bike summary of the R1 trainer. Just riding along, it's pretty good. That flywheel really ticks over, changing through the gears. It feels like you're riding a bike, which is a big tick box. The noise levels, bit of a hang up for me on those. The stepper motor design, I know how to ride a trainer with a stepper motor, which is like riding into a sprint rather than snapping into a sprint. And those resistance changes in erg, just sort of riding into them and riding out as they dip out. Just getting your head around those, it's a pretty solid trainer in that respect. But the next thing we need to look at is the data. And that's here, over on the DCR Echo analysis tool, where we can compare multiple parameters with an overlay to see what is what. I have 2 sets of data here, 2 Llama lab test protocols that I have performed, both identical tests, but one was with firmware 2.0 production and the second was 2.4, possibly a beta firmware. I'll supply this one to see if it addressed any of the issues. So standard Llama lab test here, we have 10 minutes of sim mode warm up, just getting my head around how it rides hills and responds to hills, a few sprints and a warm-up. Calibration done on the trainer, 0 offsets on all 3 power meters. I'm only showing the Asioma Duos here today. They're good enough as a known good source of power to compare. Keeps things a little simpler here. So looking at the steady state, for the 200 watts into the 250 watt steady state here, we'll jump into this one, and we'll also jump into this one. You can see they're very similar. That's why I'm going to review them in parallel. So first of all here, after the initial calibration, after 10 minutes, which was the spin down on the trainer, you can see here it's still reading a little low, 22 watts low through this section through here. It seems to warm up and get a little closer right there at the end of 10 minutes. So it took a while to warm up. Is that temperature affected? Possibly. Into the 250 watt steady state, it jumped over a little bit there and then really stabilized through here and wasn't bad overall. But do note there the spikes. Now the spikes aren't just data reporting. The spikes that are happening through here and here and here and here and here and here and here, and you can see it. It's, if you ran your finger across that, it'd be kind of spiky. That's actually happening in resistance spikes. It's not just power reporting spikes, because the pedals report the same ups and downs at the same time. You can see through there. So steady state firmware version 2.0 production, not too bad. Appears to be temperature affected. Jumping over to firmware 2.4, same deal, and kind of the same deal again. Lower after the initial spin down calibration, lower by 20 watts again, coming up to be a little more accurate here, or a little more closer to what I'd expect 200 watts to be. Now I've done hundreds of these Llama lab tests, and I could almost do these with my eyes closed. I can tell you not only are the aciomas confirming the power from the trainer is a little lower than what it's reporting, I can feel it a little lower as well. If you can knock 20 watts off any interval, it's happy days. And it was happy days. I was breathing easier, so I can feel that through the pedals. Spikes are still there. It then drifts back out here again by another 20 watts. So 2.4 firmware after the spin down, still not quite in the ballpark of plus or minus 3%. Up into the 250 watt zone, again closer with this, but it appears to oscillate. So you can almost, if you grab the whole 20 minutes there, it's down, up, down, up, down, up. And what's going on there, I don't know. And the spikes are still occurring, probably a little more through here. That's unsmooth data, and of course it's going to be quite spiky, but you can see both power meters going up and down, a little jagged. So steady state, close, but that's not a tick from the Llama lab test. Next up, we will look at the sprints. There were 3 sprints performed in both Llama lab tests. First sprint here, 1400 watts sustained from the Kinetic trainer. That's fake sprints, false sprints. That's reporting way too high there. The aciomas, 1100 watt spike, 1100 sustained, then dropping out. That's probably more accurate to where it's at. Next sprint here, 2000 watts sustained. The sprints are through the roof. You can see there probably 800 watts overreading in the sprints with the Kinetic R1, with the production firmware 2.0 reading way too high in the sprint. Third sprint, same deal, way too high by nearly 900 watts or so there. It's clipping out at 2000 watts max. That was with the 2.0 firmware. 2.4 firmware, pretty much same deal, just not quite as high. Topping out there at 1679. I wasn't doing 1679. 1118 is pretty much what I was doing indoors here. Next sprint, same deal, it's topping out way too high. I actually spun out in that sprint. You can see I've jumped from 63 watts, or 182 watts on the Faveros, up to near 1000 watts, and the unit just spin out. I was way too far ahead of that stepper motor moving in. I had the flywheel spinning way too fast, spun out. That's not how to sprint on this unit. And a third sprint with the newer firmware, same deal again, 1600 watts, which is not the levels I've ever hit on a bike. Another quick observation on the sprints is that every time you do a maximal sprint and you bring the power down, the R1 reads 0 watts. So you can see here up 1600, brings it down, and then it reads 0 watts for a few ticks there. Now this one I made sure I rode out. So I sprinted and then rode down, and that's what the aciomas are reported. Sprint, rode down, and didn't go to 0. The R1 reported 0. So its ability to read power after high spikes and coming down also needs to be looked at. Into the overs and unders, which gives an indication of how quickly the unit will change resistance and how it can hold or sustain short level over and under power. Look at both of those. First of all, here, you can see both of these are very similar with both firmwares as I jump between the two. And we jump to the first one. 350 watts, pretty good. Pretty good overall. 450, not quite as good though. Separation through here and through here. But one thing you'll note is that the spikes still exist. Here, 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 here. At the start of erg, you'll always get a kick, attack, decay, sustain, release. That's usually how erg mode works for these smaller efforts. So you get your attack, sort of decay through here, sustain. The release kind of spikes. Spike here. There's no need for a spike at the end there. We're already sitting on 450 and it spikes up at the end. So it is having those resistance spikes through here. Firmware version 2.4, same deal. Attack, decay, wonky. Release through here. Yeah. And the difference between here is around, what's that, 53 to 80. You're looking at around 25 to 30 watts difference through here in the over and unders short stuff. So power-wise there, in summary, comparing those to the ASIO Maduros, I did have a third power meter on the bike. I'm not going to include that. The ASIO Maduros are good enough for now. The steady state stuff appears to be heat affected, but not accurate enough for my standards. The sprints, well out of the ballpark. Not include that. You'll be disqualified from any Zwift races with those. The overs and unders, 350, 450. What's going on? Not quite sure there. And then just riding along after that in sim mode. Pretty close, as you can see through here. A bit of a short stab at around 370 watts through here. That looks not too bad in sim mode, just riding along. It's the steady state stuff though, that things come undone. So here's some very easy just riding along at the end here. 94 watts, 86 watts, so very low, but close-ish. So power-wise, lots of work to be done there with the firmwares to drill that down. Onto pricing and availability of this unit, and it sells for $10.50 US. I'll flip up the Australian price here, which is $16.99, and I'll flip up the others. So you know where it sits here in Australia for value and where things are at. So Tacx Neo, $18.99 leads the way at the moment. Kinetic R1, $16.99. The Kicker 18, $15.99 at the moment with a cassette, and the Kicker Core comes in at $11.99. So it sits itself up quite high in the marketplace here in Australia. Okay, almost time to wrap this one up for today. So you've seen the unit, you've seen the specs, you've heard about my experience riding the unit, you've seen the power data from that unit and where it sits in the marketplace price point wise. Straight shooting on this one, it's a no-go at this point in time. It's a brave move to be handing over the kind of cash they're asking to be jumping both feet into some beta firmware testing for the company. Now, I saw this unit over in Interbike last year in September. They've had 10 months, so nearly almost a year of internal testing, plus also their brand ambassadors and other company associates testing this unit. Why then do I get a unit that reads 2,000 watts in a sprint? Something is wrong there. Process needs to be reviewed before these things hit the shelf. However, before I get too worked up on the state of this trainer, let's go over to my to-do list. Some quick fixes that should get this thing rolling along a little better. First of all, power accuracy needs to be resolved for steady state and sprints. Whether that's temperature compensation, whether it's a better calibration, whether it's more data points from riders, I'm not sure. The power accuracy is just nowhere near the ballpark it needs to be. Those spikes in resistance in steady state could be felt through the pedals and also needs to be looked at and resolved. Cadence, that should be there in the firmware. It was, now it's not. That should be looked at and resolved as a matter of priority. Including a third-party sensor or their own sensor in the box is okay. Not a solution, no. It's a workaround. The good news is that most of those might only be a firmware update away. Things like the noise from the stepper motor and the stepper motor speed, well, they're likely to be carried on for the unit. They're the physical attributes of the unit, but get those sorted, it might be okay. And finally, onto some crystal balling. Looking into the future, if Kinetic do get to the R2, my wish list for the R2. Silent operation with a new belt, moving away from that years old horizontally grooved belt to quieten everything down. Silence is the new standard. Electromagnetic resistance unit with no stepper motor, so electromagnetics, something like what the Kicker uses, what the Neo uses. It's fast, quick, and the power accuracy and the power metering and monitoring from those can be super accurate, so it resolves a lot of problems. Also, the rock and roll with a steering turn block. It changes the experience big time for that rock and roll. Again, you're not riding in crosswinds, you want to steer a bike and have that natural feeling. So there's a few things there for the R2 which would make the experience a lot better. And to be honest, I think a lot of us expected that to be the R1 and where the R1 is at in 2019. A question I ask of all trainers that I test now is, could I use this trainer here as a known good baseline for power, resistance, and ride simulation to compare other power meters to or smart trainers? And the answer at this point in time is no. Okay, so there we are, the Llama lab test and my take on the Kinetic R1 direct drive smart trainer. Still work to be done with this unit. All right, as we're a few weeks away from Eurobike, remember to hit subscribe to be across everything that's come through the Llama lab test that will be released at that show. All right, enjoy the ride. Thanks for watching.